Can we give it up one more time for Ben and Michaela? Yeah. It takes a lot of courage to stand up and to tell your story and to go before all of your family and your friends and a whole bunch of people you don't know and declare that you are a follower of Jesus. But I think one of the coolest things that we get to do is hear the stories of how God is transforming your hearts and lives. So if you have placed your faith in Jesus and you have not made the decision to get baptized, I hope that maybe even today, Ben and Michaela gave you a little bit of courage to want to take that step to make that decision for yourself. It's always really cool to get to celebrate those stories. So today we are wrapping up the series that we have been in called In God We Trust, where we've been talking all about the idea of generosity. And for some of you, maybe you've loved being in this series. Maybe you've had some great conversations. Maybe it's like kind of caused you to think about some areas of your life that maybe you haven't given a lot of thought to before, you haven't focused on, and it's challenged you a little bit, and you've loved it. And maybe for others of you walking in, you heard that this is the final part of the series, and you were like, thank goodness. Like, I'm so tired of talking about money. And maybe you are feeling a little bit tired of feeling like people are telling you what to do with your time and what to do with your money. And you are like thankful that we are finally at the end of the series. And if you've been feeling that way at all, like if through this series you've like kind of felt some tension, maybe it's been a little uncomfortable, I would challenge you to maybe even dig a little bit deeper into why. Like, why is it that this topic can kind of make us feel uncomfortable? Why does it feel like more of a sensitive topic than maybe some of the other things that we talk about at Inside Out? And I did some kind of wrestling and thinking around why is this such a sensitive topic? And I think part of the reason that it's such a sensitive topic, and I don't think this is the only reason, but I think one of the reasons is because generosity requires something of us. In fact, I would say generosity requires sacrifice. That to truly be generous, true generosity, it means that we are giving something away. And we're often giving away things that we would consider valuable and limited. That when it comes to generosity, we're giving of our time. We're often giving of our talents, things that we have personally been gifted with. Or we're giving of our treasures, our resources, our money. And your time, it's valuable. You only have so much time in the day. You want to use your time how you want to use your time. It's valuable. When it comes to the talents, the gifts that God has given you, some of you might feel a little bit like me where you're like, I don't really know that I have like a lot of those, but the talents that you have in your life, those can give you opportunities. Those can take you places. Those things are valuable to you. Or when it comes to your treasures, your money, your resources, well, that's stuff that you need to live the kind of life that you want to live. We see those things as valuable, and they're also limited. I mean, your time is limited. You guys feel busy. You are busy. You have school. You have things that your parents require you to do. Some of you have jobs. You have sports. You have theater. You have dance. You name it. Your schedule is packed. You have Inside Out on Sunday nights. You have things that you guys are doing. You don't have a whole lot of time, it feels like, to give away. It's limited. And again, the talents, they might feel like you're limited in what you might have to offer someone else. And being in high school, when it comes to your treasures, your money, your resources, you might be like, no, as in limited, I have none. Like you're like, I'm broke. Like I've got nothing to give away. So the little bit I have, I need it. It is a very limited resource in my life. And so then when people ask us to give of those things, the things in our life that are valuable, things in our life that are limited, it can make us feel a little uncomfortable. We might have some pushback. And so through this series, you're probably not alone if your response the last few weeks as we've been talking about this idea is to just brush it off as, you know what, it's just not possible for me. And so you write it off. Or like Jake talked about in week 2, it might be something that you think, I'll do that when I'm older. When I have more time, when I have more money, when I have more resources, then I'll think about it. Or you might just think, you know what, I just don't think it's really that important of a concept or an idea. Or you might even find yourself getting a little bit cynical or frustrated that we're talking about the topic at all. And so as we close out this series tonight, what I want us to do is I want us to look at the story of a woman that we find in the New Testament who I would say had every excuse to not be generous. Could have had every excuse in the world to be frustrated about the idea of generosity. And honestly, I think she would have been justified in not being generous. But that's not how she lived her life. And I think there's something that all of us can learn from this woman. And so we're going to be in Mark chapter 12. And in this chapter, Jesus is in the last week of his ministry. He's made it to Jerusalem, and he is teaching in the temple courts. And we pick up in Mark chapter 12, verse 41. It says, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. So Jesus is sitting in the temple, and he's watching people as they're giving their offering. And there's something that Jesus is paying attention to. And he watches these people who are rich. They're wealthy. He watches them walking into the temple. They're giving large sums of money, and Jesus does nothing, no response. And then he sees this poor widow, this woman who doesn't have much, and she gives 2 small coins, which I feel like would have been maybe the equivalent of like giving 2 pennies, cents, not a whole lot of money. And Jesus watches her give her offering. And here is what Jesus does in response. After watching her, Jesus, he calls his disciples to him and says, "Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." See, the wealthy who are putting in large sums of money that probably would have been very beneficial, very helpful to the temple, Jesus says nothing. And then there's this widow who's in poverty, who gives cents, and this is the act that Jesus celebrates, to the point where he calls over his disciples and he makes a point to tell them, hey, this woman who gave me your cents, she has given more than everyone else who has given today. And what Jesus was paying attention to when he was watching people give their offerings, what he was paying attention to wasn't the amount that they were giving. He was paying attention to the posture in which they were giving. And the wealthy, their giving, it was easy. They were giving out of their excess. They were giving out of their abundance. The money that they were giving, they likely didn't need it to live off of. It was an easy gesture for them to give that money away. But for this widow, the money that she was giving, that was sacrificial giving. And she had every excuse not to give. She could have said, I don't have a lot, and what I have, I need it to live, and so I'm not going to give anything, and she could have been justified in that. She could have found herself frustrated that she didn't have what other people had, but that's not what she did. She still chose to give of the little bit that she had. And the reason that she could is because ultimately what this widow knew, the way that this widow lived her life was that she lived her life with a full trust in God himself. That she trusted God above everything else in her life. And the very thing that she could have found her security in, the very thing that she could have found value in, the very thing that was limited in her life, that's where she could have tried to put her trust. But in giving away of the little that she had, what she was demonstrating was the fact that her trust was in God above anything else in the world. You see, this widow, she got it. Like, she understood the heart of generosity. That generosity, this idea of what we've been talking about, we're not talking about the idea of generosity because God needs your money. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the point of why we're talking about this. God has created everything. He owns everything. He can do whatever it is that he wants to do and needs to do regardless of us. We're not talking about this idea because God wants your money. We're talking about this idea because ultimately, God wants your trust. And to get your trust, ultimately, God has to have your heart. And so the whole point of this series on generosity is for ultimately to get us to the point to understand and know that God wants your heart above all else. And you might hear that and think, I don't understand how that connects to generosity. How does God having my heart fit with the fact that we've been talking about generosity for the last 3 weeks, now 4 weeks? What do those have to do with each other? Well, when God has your heart, when God truly gets a hold of your life, well, then everything else follows. You see, when God really has our heart, when God really is the one who ultimately has control of our life, well, then our time follows, our talents follow, and our treasures follow, and we view all of those as a way to glorify God and to benefit others. You see, it's just like Ashlyn talked about last week. She talked about the idea that we are simply managers of the things we have. We're not owners. Everything that we have has been entrusted to us by God, and we are simply asked to manage it. When God truly has our heart, we get that. And we live like that's true, and the things in our life that could easily have control over us no longer have control over us, because it's ultimately God himself who is the one that has our hearts. And when we actually begin to live our lives open-handed with what God has given us, instead of closed-fisted hanging on to the things that we have, living our lives with our time, our talents, and our treasures, living with those things only benefiting us, when we choose to instead live open-handed, well, that is one of the biggest indicators that God has our heart, that God has our trust. And so when we actually begin to live generously, it's really a way of us declaring. It's really a way of us showing, you know what, ultimately my trust, ultimately my heart, it belongs to God and to God alone. And we talk a lot about how we want our faith to be a more than Sunday faith. And this is one of the ways to do that. That our faith, it's not just limited to here on Sunday nights, but if we would actually take a look at the time that we have, the talents that we have, the treasures that we have, and if we would look at how every day, in our everyday life, with everything that we have, how can we use those things to benefit God, to glorify God, and to benefit others? Well, that is a way that our faith becomes a more than Sunday faith. It's why generosity is important. It's why it matters. It's not about the money. It's not about the amount of money. It's not about God needing something from you. It is a way to put into action that your trust and that your dependence is in God and in God alone. And so as we wrap up tonight, I want you to ask yourself the question, how can I trust God and benefit others with my time, my talent, and my treasures? What can you do with your time? Where can you serve? We talked about this last week, serving, whether it's in our church or whether it's somewhere in our community. Instead of saying, okay, maybe when I get a free hour here or there, well, then I'll use that time to glorify God and benefit others. No, where can you find ways to fit that time in? To not give God your leftovers, to not give the excess, but to say, no, I'm going to create time in order to glorify God and to benefit others. And where can you give? Again, whether it's within our church or it's somewhere within our community, how can you take some of what you earn and say, you know what, I'm going to take some of this, and as hard as it might be to give some away, I'm going to do this as an exercise in trusting God to say, I want to glorify you and I want to benefit others with what I've been given. And so tonight, we want to put that into practice. In the first week of this series, we handed out this generosity commitment card. And on this card, we have given you 2 areas where you can figure out what it looks like to be generous this year. We've asked you, hey, would you be willing to give a percentage of the money that you earn this year? So if your parents ever give you allowance of any sort, if you babysit and get money, if you have a job and get a paycheck, we know that at times the money you earn, it's sporadic, but any time that you earn money, would you be willing to say, okay, God, I want to give a percentage back? Again, whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else, to say, I'm going to glorify you, and I'm going to benefit others with what I've been given. And then what would it look like this year to find somewhere to serve? To say, okay, I'm going to glorify God, I'm going to benefit others with my time. And hopefully, over the past few weeks, you've talked to your parents, you've been talking to your small group, you've been in prayer about what it might look like for you to be generous this year. And so what we're going to do for the next few minutes is we have some people who have some baskets with cards and pens, and we're going to hand those out. You guys pass them out, grab a card and grab a pen, and we want you to spend the next few minutes just filling out this card. And don't look to the right or the left. It doesn't matter what anybody else puts down. This is simply between you and God. But what would it look like this year for you to trust God and benefit others with your time, your talents, and your treasures? Remember, it's not about the amount. God isn't concerned about the amount. What he cares about is your heart. What he cares about is your posture. And so we want you to spend some time, get alone with God. Spend some time filling out this card and then hold on to it, because you're going to take this back to small group with you, and you're going to spend some time in small group talking about what you wrote down. And if in this moment, if you write nothing down, that's okay. We want you to go to small group and talk about that. We want you to take the next few minutes, spend some time filling out this card. Stay quiet. Don't talk to your neighbors. Don't look at what anybody else is writing down. Let this be a moment between you and God alone. And after a few minutes, the band is going to come back out, and we're going to sing one more song together, and then I'll be back up to dismiss you guys and tell you what's next.